name's Matt. My son Zach, he's 13. In fact, if you just turn around to that poster which says "This is me," that stunning boy there with the teddy bear, that's our Zach. And Zach has complex autism, and Zach's been here at Prior's Court for about 3 life-changing years. So yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Ferial. I am a parent and a carer of Sebi, who's been at Prior's Court for 2.5 years. Sebi's 11 and he lives in Giles House, and he has a diagnosis of profound autism, and he also has ADHD, and he's non-verbal. And I also have navigated working full-time as a senior manager at Visa. So so that's my other hat, and I can give a bit of perspective as what it's like working when you're a carer with somebody with complex needs.
I'm Scarlett, and my daughter Lila, she's here at Prior's Court. She's been here for 7 years, but only residential for the last year, and she's 14 on Monday. She's non-verbal and a girl, so it does happen, contrary to the media's beliefs.
My name is Claudine. I work at Prior's Court. I work in one of the homes for children or young people aged 16 to 19. I've also worked in the education department as well. That's me.
And I'm Matt. I'm the joint registered manager for our children's home. I've been at Prior's Court myself for about 5 years, but I've been supporting young people with autism for about 15 years now. Actually. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So we've got about 20 minutes or so to run through questions. We have got quite a lot that have been submitted, so we'll do our best to get through them. If there's any time at the end, then we'll open up for any other questions. Please do ask any follow-up questions you've got, or if you wanted to input into the answers, please feel free to do so. It'd be nice to have a bit of a discussion around the questions. Okay, should we get going? Fab. Okay, so the first question that's been submitted is, can you explain complex autism and what life is like for young people that live with complex autism? So I know, Matt, you mentioned that you...
Yeah, if I kick us off, I mean, for me, complex autism, it's a reality that is largely, I would say, invisible to mainstream society. So Zach, for instance, minimally verbal, can self-harm, anxiety, sleeplessness. He has something called pica syndrome. So everything from inedible flowers to batteries go in his mouth. That's how he seeks the world. No sense of danger, but a dangerously high pain threshold. So we don't know, an upset stomach could be appendicitis, a sore throat could be tonsillitis, a headache could be a migraine or a brain tumour. We have no idea. His needs are so complex that he can't live with us in the family home because we can't meet his needs and keep him safe. Zach will, barring a miracle drug, be never able to have a sexual relationship, get married, have children, grandchildren, live independently, have a job, earn money. That is not to shock people, it's just the reality of what complex autism is. He needs 24 hours one-to-one supervision to keep him safe, which he gets here at Prior's Court, and it's been a life-changing 3 years. And I think the key for complex autism is, to the broader public, autism now tends to only describe the more traditionally skilled, verbal, visible end of the spectrum, because people who meet those criteria by the nature have a voice. So they're the people that attend conferences, represent themselves at policy-making decisions, and appear in the media. And the result is that complex autism individuals, like our children, get left behind, and they don't get the funding or the care that they deserve. And because there's a lack of awareness about this in the wider society, often amongst the government, local authorities, the very people that provide funding, social workers themselves have very little idea. So we are constantly, as parents, having to fight, to advocate, to go to tribunals, to remortgage houses, to be able to get funding to allow our people to have the lives that they need. So complex autism is a term that in no way seeks to demean individuals in that group, and nor does it seek to invalidate the experience of those people that are not part of it. But we need to get complex autism out there in the mainstream, because then it will raise awareness, which will raise understanding, and then hopefully raise empathy, so that children like my Zach can get the care and dignity in life that they need. So thank you for being here today, because it's absolutely essential. You're part of this journey to be able to bring complex autism to the mainstream. So thank you. It's really important that you're here today.
Wow.
Brilliant.
Yeah, well done. Thank
It's
you
so
for
difficult to
sharing.
explain, and that's, I'm going to use a lot of what you've said there when I speak because it's difficult to put into words. So no pressure, everyone.
I did have notes. I had notes because I just knew it's such an important question that you asked. So I wanted to give it the care that it needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Well
Does
done.
anyone else
Great.
want to weigh in at all on that?
I mean, that was such a powerful message, Matt. You know, I don't know if I can top that. I guess from a perspective in terms of what we recognise as how we support the young people here, it's about understanding what those complexities are in detail, and I think you mentioned autism as a spectrum, and a lot of people recognise or perceive the spectrum as being from one end to the other as being less autistic or to very autistic, and that's not really how the spectrum works. It's much more like a colour wheel, and you have different elements of that in terms of language skills, perceptive, expressive language and receptive language, social skills, sensory processing, executive function, and within each of those areas, people have skill levels, and when it comes to complex autism, often in many of those areas, those skill levels haven't quite developed, and that's how that spectrum kind of works for a lot of the young people that we support here, and I think it's really important for us, as we support those people, to recognise each of those elements of that spectrum so that we can help them develop those skills as much as possible.
Brilliant, thank you, Matt.
That's great, yeah. That kind of leads nicely onto the next question, which is what makes Prize Court the best place for young people with complex autism to be?
Yeah. I'll go in. It is the fact of, like you say, homing in on the skills or the strengths of each child. So when my daughter was at a local authority SEND school, there was nothing wrong with that school, but she was just getting a sensory education. So she was going to school, listening to nursery rhymes, playing with cause and effects toys, which she loves, and she was safe and happy, but she was learning nothing because their perception was, you have severe autism, you don't tick all the key stage boxes, you can't read, you can't write, you can't feed a baby with a cup, so therefore you can't do anything. When actually her skill level is quite high, like she knows all her numbers, all her colours. She had an assessment with like eye gaze technology, and they asked her because she's non-verbal, 500 common words, and she looked at the correct picture of that word. So she has got the skill set, she just needs to learn in a different way. And so Prize Court does do that. So I don't know if people here have heard about the bakery that they've got here. So they had a lot of young people that were interested in cooking, and then that's now become a whole enterprise, and they can make cakes. And then it was a lot of people into music, and so raising money for the what's called the music centre. So they kind of look like they have got a skill, and then that can go with them through life, and they can do jobs and make money and work in these areas with a little bit of flexibility. Like they probably will always need some support, but they would get the job done as quick as someone else, or even quicker. Some of the brains putting things in alphabetical order, for example. I've heard of children with complex autism working in a post room, and they can do it quicker than a machine. So it's just, Prize Court, they home into all them skills. And my daughter, like, I get picture updates, and she's doing house jobs, laundry, dishwasher, cleaning, using a hoover. And so going back to the school she was at previously, where she was going in, watching a TV, singing some songs and coming home and like learning nothing. So for me, it's really life-changing for her.
Thanks, Glenn.
Amazing.
Yeah, I
think here at Prior's Court we focus on the individual, and we look at each of our young people here and look at how we can improve every single area of their life. We have OT, occupational therapist, we have speech and language, we have a lot of vocational skills that we can hone in and see where young people do better in and focus on that. And even within the home, we're a waking day curriculum. We teach them throughout the day. So we teach them, like you said, laundry and things like that within the home, and how they can translate those different skills into the vocational setting, like you said, to the bakery, for example. But then they can also use those skills to cook themselves a meal, with the aim that we can increase their independence so that one day they can start doing those things and learn how to do things for themselves. And with that, we take into consideration them as individuals, and we place them in homes where other young people, they can get along with them, and their environment works to suit their needs all day, every day.
And I think one of the really important things about Prize Court is that it's 52-week placement. So Scarlett was talking about traditional mainstream SEND schools, where they have like long school holidays, whereas young people with complex autism, like our young people, their learning needs are like, they need to learn constantly every day, because if they have those long periods of holiday, their skills regress, and they can find that really distressing. So the fact that they've got an environment where they're safe, that their care needs can be met, but that they can learn throughout those 52 weeks in such a variety of environments is so important. So for example, my son, he struggles being indoors in noisy environments, but there's a 52-acre site, so if he's finding stuff distressing, he can perhaps go and learn in the woods, or he can go over to the countryside learning centre, and you just don't get those facilities at normal mainstream schools. And he had quite a similar experience to Lila. In mainstream SEND schools, they do tend to focus on the more able special needs kids, so that children with more complex needs just get left behind, and that's not fair, because everybody deserves to have a curriculum that meets their needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, guys. So this again leads on really nicely. So someone asked, what are the changes you've seen in your child since they've attended Prize Court, if any?
Yeah, I think for Zach, so Zach has a handful of words, mainly food motivated, so cake. So I'll see him after maybe a couple of weeks away, and I'll just give him a hug, and he'll just look at me and go, cake. But since then, what we found is more and more words, and the staff here and the teachers are helping him find ways to express himself. So the other day I was taking him back, so he comes back every now and then for 12 hours, for a night, which is manageable, and he was in the car and he looked at me and he went, swimming pool. And he loves swimming, and when we went swimming, and then he, at the end of an hour, started to get out of the pool and went, sandals, and pointed to his sandals. Now, I've never heard him say that word. And so what is happening is, because of the input, the quality of the teaching, the expertise that they have here, he's starting to be able to find a voice, So for appropriate moments, so just enough, a handful of language, which our great hope is he will then be able to have language to maybe express if he's in pain. That's always our big worry, or if he's worried or scared. So he's finding a few more words, and his voice is getting louder, and his anxiety levels that often we can only read through physicality, body language, meltdown, and as a meltdown is very different to a tantrum. A tantrum a kid is for often attention. A meltdown is you are in yourself. It is catastrophic. You're not doing it to get attention. You've lost control. It's the only thing you can do. So the meltdowns are few and far between to how they were 3 years ago. And that's no accident. That's all because of the expertise and the care that he has here. So that's been our big change.
Yeah, I totally echo that. For my son, he definitely has fewer meltdowns, and meltdowns like when you're in the family home can be really scary. We were having glasses thrown and things like that, furniture pulled over. So to have something, because as a parent in the family home, you can't have a sensory room, or you can't have, you don't have, like, my garden at home doesn't compare with the woods here. Like, my son's got a real affinity with trees. He'll go up to trees and hug them. Like, I'm not saying he's got a special skill at all. It's just, that I think our kids are very special, that they perceive the environment in a different way. And I totally echo that. I think my son's really a lot calmer. Like, I'm really proud of him because he went residential when he was 8 years old. And that's a really hard thing to do, but when I drop him off, I bring him home most weekends because we only live in Reading. And when I drop him off on a Sunday evening, he doesn't look back at me. He's happy just to trot back into the house. And it's really nice. And I think in terms of receptive language, my son doesn't have any words at all. But in terms of receptive language, I definitely think he understands more of what I'm saying to him, which is lovely. And I can definitely see that tangible difference.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Lila's the same. Like, she definitely has less meltdowns, but also just her daily living skills. So when she originally started as a day pupil, she could only drink from a baby's bottle still, and now she can use like a proper cup. It's so many little things, but they add up to a bigger picture. So she can now put her own shoes on, her own coat on. She's currently still incontinent, and the older she's getting, the harder and harder incontinence products are for SEND children. That's another issue, but they make them for babies and they make them for adults, and there's no incontinence products for people that are 5 to 25. And so toileting is a massive one. So now we're starting in last year this toilet training schedule, and it's really coming on. And so that would be life changing. Like, if she could learn to use the toilet and not be in incontinence products, obviously for the future, because out in the community there's nowhere to change people that are in incontinence products. So all of them skills, because it is a routine, and like you say, 24 hours, and they have the staff where they can take her to the toilet every 15 minutes or 15 minutes after she's had food and drink, and then she will make that connection, and eventually it will become a sort of routine, and they have lots of success there with children that have sort of gone through that. So yeah, that would be life changing for her.
I think those were 3 quite different examples there, which is really interesting, I think, to hear. So this one might be more over for Claudine and Matt. So lots of people were interested in the pandemic and how that impacted obviously everything that we do here and what happened. I wasn't here then, so
Yeah, do you want to start?
I actually started here just over 2.5 years ago, which was mid-pandemic, which was really, really difficult for our young people and staff and our whole site. The one lucky part is that we do have so much space. So our young people were still able to access the space and be outside and try to develop a sense of norm. Of course, it's really difficult with young people with autism to change their routine. And I personally want to praise all of our young people for how well they actually did, because it was really, really difficult for them to adjust. And we had to adjust the way we teach. I think at the time they were going in different groups. We had to kind of change the groups up a little bit to offer that, space. And it was really, really difficult for them. And just before that, they were going out a lot more, accessing a lot more in the community. And that happened, and it shut that down for them. And a lot of young people found it really difficult. Families couldn't come and visit as much as they did previously. But our young people, I just have to praise them for how well they did, and we tried to adjust as much as we could, support them as much as we could in that time. But it was really difficult for them, I think.
Yeah, we're a big community here. We've talked about the size of the site being 52 acres. We've got currently 53 young people in our children's home, and 25 in our young adult provision. We did a lot of things and kind of events together, the difference that we had to make in terms of that pandemic, because we really had to bubble up each of our kind of residential houses and operate as kind of those individual units a lot more. And there was a lot of challenges with that, because a lot of our young people that we support, part of their autism is about having those routines and that predictability around what to expect day in, day out. And when suddenly you can't do the thing that you did yesterday, and you can't go to the places that you want to go. That's really hard to understand and recognise. And that had a huge impact on some of our young people. But equally, you know, the adaptability that they then did show in being able to learn those new routines and those new systems was phenomenal, you know, and actually the way that they coped with those elements was you know, impressive. And I don't know if you saw the difference in each of your children as part of that, but it was so impressive. I think you know, challenges around not being able to access the things that they wanted to, like our multi-sensory room all of the time, which generally is open all of the time, and our young people can go in and out as when they need to and do different sessions in there. But we had to kind of limit access to that and kind of schedule when people could go in and out, and then clean it in between and all that kind of stuff, which limited how much time people could spend in there. The swimming pool and things were the same, and all of our gym and facilities and all of our learning environments in terms of our countryside learning centre and our bakery, and you know, the access to that was all limited. So we had to adapt how we supported our young people in terms of doing a lot of those things in their home environments as well. But actually, overall, they coped so well. You know, yes, there was those changing routines, but once we got those through, the adaptability of those, despite the challenges that everyone was facing, you know, walking around in masks and aprons and gowns and not being able to tell who was who, you know, the way that they managed all of that was so impressive.
There was one young person who learnt to identify certain stuff by their shoes. So every time he would greet me, he would look down first and see my trainers, and then look up and be like, "Hello, Claudine." And then same, if I changed my trainers, he'd take a second minute to be like, "Okay, who are you?" And even just leading on from that, teaching them to keep up with the hand washing and the cleanliness was difficult, because some of our young people didn't understand why am I washing my hands all the time, and why am I having to do certain things differently. And they've learnt a lot of skills from that, I must say. And even when we had to reintroduce the community back to them when we were allowed to, they coped really well with going back out into the community, into a busy area, a busy park somewhere. They really coped really well, and you could see how happy it made them to be out experiencing that again.
And also just briefly, the selflessness and sacrifice of the staff, because you know, this is our kids need one-to-one care, and so obviously the pandemic hits us all, and it's like, well, oh my God, what's going to happen? That's it. And for children like our kids to come and live back at home, it would have been catastrophic for them and for us. So the staff managed to continue to give one-to-one care to keep our children safe, often at the expense of going home to be with their families. You know, and this was back in the crazy dark ages, pre-vaccines. This pandemic, which was, we were living in fear and terrified, and I didn't see Zach for 8 weeks, because the choice was, well, look, he can come home, but if he comes home, he can't come back until things are clearer. And so we had to make that decision. Well, we can't rob him of what he's got here. 52 acres, open space, safety. So all the time we had to make those decisions, but the staff were just totally selfless in the face of, you know, huge, you know, danger to themselves. And don't forget, a lot of children with complex autism, their comorbidities are higher. Asthma, diabetes, obesity, health issues, very complex. So very vulnerable to something like the pandemic, which then, as we know, means that the staff are, even though they're fully PPE, you know, with protection, but we know they're putting themselves on the front line. So how you navigated that through that time is just phenomenal. You know.
We've got about 5 more minutes, so we're going to do like probably some quick fire questions. Obviously, if anyone wants people to expand, while we're talking the rest of the day, please do ask you guys. So I've got one which is quite relevant. Obviously, we've got lots of people from different businesses here, and someone's asked, you know, what would you like to see happen out in the corporate world and more the community and corporate spaces that could help the young people here?
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
So, I work at Visa, so we've got employee resource groups for different interest groups, and one of the groups that I've done a lot of work with is our like disability group, which is called Viable, and just like really promoting how it's important for businesses to support parent carers as well as carers of people with hidden disabilities. So when my son was going through his diagnosis, it was sometimes it was challenging to get the flexible working that I needed in order to take my son to appointments, to go to social services meetings, and that's moved on leaps and bounds. But I advocate for other parents and advocate for my colleagues to actually like raise awareness that, you know, complex autism does exist. So if you've got a colleague who's got a child who's going through an autism diagnosis, it doesn't mean to say that that child's going to grow up to be, and I'm not being in any way disparaging someone like Chris Packham, who's able to like earn £300,000 a year and, you know, have a pretty much independent life. You know, autism can be really complex. So, for example, my son, if you saw him in the street, you'd think he was normal neurotypical young lad, and then if he starts like laying down on the floor or kicking me or biting me, he was just going to assume that child's naughty. But no, he's got a really complex condition that means that he's going to need 24/7 care for the rest of his life. But to be able to work and, you know, navigate for his needs, if I didn't have those reasonable adjustments that my employer made, then I wouldn't have been able to carry on working, because like the local authorities are just saying, well, you should give up work, you should rely on handouts. But I've got a valid contribution to make, and, you know, I have a right to have a career, and that in turn allows me to give strength and support to my son. Whereas if that gets taken away, it just takes, by default, it just takes the support away from my son as well. So there's hundreds of carers going through this, and I think the thing that you have to remember with parents who are carers, that they're going to be carers for the rest of their lives. So the sad fact is, Scarlett, Matt and I, we're going to have to worry about what happens with our young people for the rest of our lives, and then obviously worry about who's going to look after them when we're gone. And that's, you know, so I think if we can just, if businesses in the corporate world can just do their bit to support families living with hidden disabilities, you know, it would just make that level of acceptance and understanding higher. So
Brilliant. That's great, thank you. Should we ask one more?
Yeah.
So we've got a really interesting one here, which is, we are looking to design a fire safety package for young people with learning difficulties. What would be the key points you would think about before starting this?
Yeah, good question. I think what's important to assess first of all is the level that you need to pitch the package at, and recognise that, because there are going to be so many different levels within kind of that. So working out where you want to pitch that first of all is really important. From our perspective and the young people that we support, and I think what's important to recognise is the fact that concepts can be really, really difficult to understand. You know, in terms of like just danger awareness, you know, and so actually a real important learning factor for them is just, how do I respond? What routine do I have to manage something when this happens? Which is really, really important. So that's about pitching it in terms of how I respond to different things, as opposed to understanding concepts of dangers, as it were. And then the other factor, I think, is probably recognising the importance of visual information in getting messages across, because that is so powerful, you know, rather than just talking about things. I feel like I'm going into training mode a little bit now, but everybody knows what this sign is, right? Yeah, as an okay sign. If I get everybody to make that sign for me, just shout out. Okay. Right, now what I want you to do is just put that on your cheek.
Oh.
Right? So I said put it on your cheek, but I put it on my chin. Everybody in the room put it on their chin, right? So that just, it's a demonstration of how important that visual information is. Yeah. So quick fire questions. That's kind of points that I would make there is, power of visual information. Figure out what level you're kind of pitching it at, and the recognition that, particularly for the young people that we support here, those concepts are really hard. So just building in the understanding of routines of how I respond to different situations when this happens. What do I do? I don't know if anything else.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on the visual side of it. So my daughter had to have an operation recently. So as you can imagine, it's scary for all of us, but she had no knowledge of what was going to happen, being put to sleep. And our local hospital had like this kind of walk-through video of, so like literally going in the doors at reception, and it was kind of like a walkthrough, and it was on an app. So we put it on the app here, and the staff supported her to just watch it. A lot of the children with complex autism are very visual, like they watch the same things on their iPad, the same 2 minutes over and over again. It's like a stim. So then Lila was watching this hospital walkthrough video over and over and over again, and I can't say if it helped because I didn't know how she'd react in the situation, but it was a success. She was in hospital, she had her sedation and everything. So I think, the importance of, visual stories, social cues, actual real life pictures sometimes, because sometimes symbols, they are universal, but not all children will recognise them, where, if you were talking about like a fire extinguisher, you had a physical picture of it, a photo, everyone will recognise that. So I think it would sort of embed it more, like the social stories and the pictures and videos.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. That was really great answers and really interesting. I feel like I've learned some things there, which is great.
Sure. We have loads more questions, so thank you for everyone for submitting them. What we'll do is at some point we'll connect with these guys and we'll email over maybe the answers to the ones we didn't get to, if that's okay with you guys. Just want to say a big thank you to our panel for coming today.
Okay, so I think in a moment we'll head out to do a bit of volunteering.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to grab another coffee, a bit more food, and then in 5 minutes I'll stand by the door and put my hand up and you know what I mean? Okay?
Perfect.
Well done, guys.